it's a huge honour for me to be able to moderate this panel for a number of reasons. I was the inaugural chair of Innovate Finance, and to see the job that Natalie, who's just left the stage, and her team have done over the years to build this to what it is now, which is the critical event in the FinTech calendar globally, is absolutely fantastic, and that's only possible because of all of you attending, so thank you all very much as well. And I do think, there's lots of very interesting things going on, but this really is a very important group of people because, FinTech isn't one silo, FinTech isn't one city. It's a global phenomenon, we know that, but the work that goes on in the regions doesn't always necessarily get the profile that it should. And so we've got a fantastic panel here. I'm going to introduce them one by one, but please, as they come up, do give them a round of applause after I've introduced them, because it's after lunch and we need some energy in the room. That said, you don't need any more energy than the first person I'm going to introduce, Sier. Chris was described by the Financial Times a couple of years ago as the outspoken academic. But Chris has always got plenty to say, but what I can absolutely tell you about Chris, as well as his day job, because he's taken the plunge and has a startup now, Chris has been championing the Northern Powerhouse and regional FinTech more than anybody for 6 years. So he's also the Envoy for the North of England for FinTech. So please give him a big round of applause, Chris. Okay, so next up, we were due to have, I think it's an upgrade. We were due to have Lukies here from FinTech Scotland. She has been called urgently to something to do with government, surely nothing to do with independence, I don't know. Let's get through Brexit first. But we're lucky to have Dr. Jane here, Dr. Jane Lewis, who's from the Women's Coin Foundation and chose to set that up in Edinburgh, so I'm sure she's going to do a fantastic job of explaining why Scotland's a great place to be a FinTech. Please welcome Jane up. Thank you. Now from the valleys, so we have Richard Theo. He doesn't speak like a Welshman, but he's embraced everything that there is about Wales. Fantastic country it is. Having broken many bones of my own on the rugby fields of Wales, I reluctantly welcome the Welsh to our panel. Richard, as well as being the CEO of Wealthify, has just today launched FinTech Wales. Please give him a big round of applause. Thank you. And then always you need to finish with the luck of the Irish, and we have one of banking's great characters. Many of you will know David Duffy, ran a very big bank in Ireland, but now is currently running the Clydesdale Yorkshire Banking Group, which also includes Virgin Money, and is England's FinTech Envoy, and just an absolute bundle of energy for the industry. So David, please come up. Thank you very much. So listen, thanks for all being here. We don't have a huge amount of time, so we're going to crack straight in, and I'm going to come to Chris first to talk passionately, as he always does, about why the North of England is so important and such a thriving ecosystem, but also, if you can, Chris, this announcement that you've made today, which seems like another great step forward of collaboration between Innovate Finance, the national trade body, yourselves, and FinTech Scotland.
I'll try and limit myself to my allotted time, which is not much. But so many of you probably aren't aware, but for financial services, the North of England represents the 9th largest economy in Europe. So as an entity across the North of England, that region is the 9th largest financial services economy in Europe. It employs 11 times as many people in financial services as the city of Frankfurt, and that's just the cities of Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, and Sheffield. So the capacity is enormous. There's a lot going on. The announcement in respect of our collaboration with Innovate Finance, well, we represent a sort of a regional capacity for the North of England. It spans from the east to the west, north to the south, including Newcastle, Hull, and other cities as well as the ones I've mentioned. And we coordinate for that community, but we don't coordinate a national agenda. That's Innovate Finance. Innovate Finance suffers from the issue of scale. It's a national community. It can't organise regionally. We can organise regionally. And that's what we're going to do. Our network in the last 18 months has run 27 large events, the last of which was about a week ago in Manchester, we had 400 people in a not dissimilar themed setting to the one we have here, talking within the halls of the University of Manchester about innovation and financial services in the north of England. It's a fantastic network. We've done put a lot of work to get it going. And on top of this internally focused, if you like, network of conferences that we run, which are information building, the collaboration, we've also run 3 successful inward-bound missions from Europe in the past 12 months. The last of which we had 88 applications from scale-ups and startups from the Baltics and Scandinavia and Northern Europe for what were only 22 places. And these organisations came to the cities of Manchester, Leeds and Liverpool to see what the capacity is. And I'm very pleased to say about half a dozen of them are thinking of staying. In fact, I think 2, Julian, please correct me, have in the past 2 or 3 months. So to dispel any notion that there may be a problem of communication between the UK or at least the north of England and the rest of Europe, there isn't one. People still want to come here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. And I think this point, as we're going to talk a bit in a minute about the FinTech bridges and our international partnerships that have to represent all of the regional agendas. And wherever you go in the world now, certainly if you go to the US, Washington are trying to regulate New York. They're looking at Silicon Valley as the disruptors. But it's really this fusion that we have. It's this ability to combine big and small and old and new in all the regions that is a great differentiator. And I was at a fantastic event in Bahrain. We have many delegates here from Bahrain today. And it was fantastic to see them say, no, this is a regional agenda. Yeah, it's not just about Bahrain, it's about all of the areas in the Gulf states. And that's really what we're doing at national level. I'm going to jump, David, if I can, to you quickly. You really have seen FinTech from all angles because you're putting together a number of banks, you're growing a new brand, and you're running something of scale. So what's your perspective on the national agenda and also on just being a big FinTech?
Yeah, I think, so Virgin Money is the brand that we're going to deploy and replace Clydesdale and Yorkshire. So you'll have the 6th largest bank in the UK under a Virgin brand. The bias we have is we see FinTech very much as a collaboration and integration model. I heard something a little bit earlier about is there an effective cultural affinity between people trying to do that? And the short answer is you can do it very effectively. First couple of outings, you learn a lot, but you can. But equally, the national agenda has to be one where all of this strength, my bank operates in substance an awful lot in the north, where Chris was talking about, and not taking advantage of bringing the north and the south together would be a real underpinning weakness in the whole story going forward. The other side of this is big tech and its influence, and the model we're operating is one where we expect to have an open banking 60 Virgin brands from the group around the world connect into our bank offering.
Wow.
With a heavy FinTech bias.
Yeah.
And then we will have scale and cost partnerships with big tech and telco, most likely the next evolution, as banking is changing from being a bank to more being a lifestyle ecosystem with a range of services that are not sector specific. So some of the Ping An model you might have seen in Asia, that type of thing. That's happening and happening at speed, and the big techs and telcos are all actually in beta testing to replace banks. So what we're doing is experimenting a little bit. I have no idea if I'll be sitting here next year. But the reality is, take a powerful brand that's a consumer brand, take a lifestyle range of products, take a FinTech enormous strength in the UK, deploy it to solve a lot of the things we're not good at, and then go compete at scale with large partnerships in the model, and then, just because everyone has one, deploy a digital bank, a standalone digital bank as well, in case you need it. But the real thing I've seen from trying to go from both ends of this into the middle with the bank is fragmentation is a danger if you don't get a cohesive story, much like Chris is talking about, where you bring things together and execute the combined strength of all of the regions and all of the sectors, both large and small, startup and scale up. If you don't do that brilliantly, you'll probably dilute a lot of the power and effectiveness of what the UK could become in the future. So I think it's off to a brilliant start. It's going to go very, very well. And we're almost like a petri dish for big tech and FinTech meeting in the middle with bank tech and seeing what the next model is. So it's quite an interesting space at the moment.
And David, just continue on that point for a sec, because I do want to cover it in more detail with these guys later. But you mentioned big tech, but of course there's this wave now of what we call tech fin. So we've seen the Apple Card be launched. There's rumours of big Silicon Valley giants acquiring merchant acquirers and coming into the space. Open banking, we think, enables them to do that. So I agree with you, it's about fusion. I think the UK's big differentiator, things like rule of law, big and small working together, regions working together, is a differentiator. But can even that level of fusion, even if we quicken it, as CEO of a big bank, stand up against these huge tech giants that have 1 billion users?
I think the short answer is no. I would expect banks, in the most part, large-scale national banks, to be eliminated in terms of 75% of their capability and resource. A bank is a vertical pyramid, if you think of it like that, and 2/3 of that pyramid has nothing to do with banking. It's just a happenstance of the past that all of those activities were involved in a bank. So what you look at, I think, in the next generation is a very important logistics and supply and distribution capability that's got nothing to do with banks. Probably payments will be taken over by non-banks, as banks' legacy systems are not being invested at on a global multi-currency level the same as all the others are. So banks own the brand, the data, and the relationship, and not much else, frankly, in history. So what you will see is a change of the model for many of those things. I've actually been and seen one that I can't talk about, where it's drawn out, it's mapped out, and it has a timeline, and it does exactly what I've just described. So I think that is the reality, and it's probably a better reality, because whether you're on Amazon or Facebook or anybody else, name one of them, they have a better relationship with your customer than you do in terms of service and supply. So there has to be something that gives there. But I think the rule of law and regulation is fundamental. A lot of the beta systems I've seen in Asia are founded on the principle of who cares who has what data and no regulation of substance. So if you're going to go that route, you can have anything you like, of course. But the advantage for the UK will be to deploy its reg capability, its reg competition agenda, and its rule of law into that future banking model, and I think that's where the UK becomes a winner.
Fantastic, and a hugely enlightened view, and amazing for me to hear a CEO of a big bank talk like that, because 10 years ago, just after the GFC, it was almost inconceivable that people would be thinking that way. So I think in relative terms, it's a big shift. Richard, you've got two, I think, fascinating angles to contribute here. One, Wealthify deals with a very big organisation, so you have the day-to-day pain of the machinery and how to move it forward to get a more innovative product out to many, many customers, whilst respecting the fact they're a regulated entity. But then also in what David's described, what is it that Wales has in its ecosystem that can really help accelerate this fusion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Al. Just to put a bit of history and background on this, the UK government had the kind of vision to appoint some envoys around the UK to pursue this regional agenda, recognising that too much of what was going on in fintech was utterly focused on London. Yeah. And that's actually not a good thing at all, actually, because we have some amazing strengths in the regions of the UK. Sadly, Wales was the last one to be appointed, so I came into this role, I think, last May. And when considering that challenge, of course, I was faced with another challenge, which is we have our own government in Wales, and it has its own agenda. And of course, that government is very left-wing, whereas the current UK government is right-wing. And so I had to kind of think about how we could marry that up. But actually, in truth, both governments have had totally the same agenda, which was the regional sort of diversification of fintech. I talked into people in Welsh government to discuss how we could make that work jointly. And we ended up coming up with, I'm kind of excited today to announce that we're launching a new organisation that will be called FinTech Wales. And in looking around at what was going on in the other regions, particularly in Scotland, we noticed that Scottish Financial Enterprise had been around for many, many years in Scotland as a trade association, so a voice for the industry in Scotland. And latterly, FinTech Scotland was formed to become more of the kind of champion of fintech within that context. But looking in Wales, we have neither of those things present, so we decided with FinTech Wales that we will make it both of those things. So it will become a members association, a voice for the industry, and it will champion fintech in every way that we want fintech championed. So we will run sort of programs of activities to help start up, make sure that a person sat at his desk in Admiral or GoCompare or Motonova or any of the other great companies that we have there as an existing cluster can get out from his desk, find some space, and get support, mentoring and help, funding, training, and have the best chance of succeeding. But we also, of course, importantly, want to also empower the scale-up phase of business, because I think that's one of the sort of most challenging areas that we have in the UK, is how we take those ideas that have got so far and actually scale them to the next stage. Our journey at Wealthify, our next stage in that scale-up was to partner with Aviva. Aviva having 15 million UK customers and a lot of capital to help us on our journey of customer acquisition and funding a business and evolving. And we work on that journey today excitedly. But under the sort of FinTech Wales umbrella, today is really just the first step. We've put together an advisory board consisting of sort of luminary leaders, and we have support. One of the exciting things we have in Wales in particular is we have an incredible sense of community.
Yeah.
So we have the CEOs of the 3 or 4 biggest Welsh financial services institutions prepared to come and sit at the desk, at the table for FinTech Wales and help. And they're prepared to help small companies and put their name there. So we have this incredible sense of community. We're just 2 hours from London, which is, you can't escape it. It is where a lot of the business is done. So, I'm here today. I'm here almost every week on different businesses, different business opportunities. But we'll build on FinTech Wales. We'll build it out to be an organisation. I've really done my bit now, which was to incept it and get it moving. Welsh Government had the vision to find us somebody to join. Gavin, I believe, Gavin Powell, he's going to be the General Secretary of the organisation. He's here in the audience today. And we will, build the organisation out from there, led by him in terms of putting an organisation together and achieving all those things I've talked about.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds very exciting, and if you could encourage many of the Welsh rugby team to join that so they're distracted before the World Cup, I'd really appreciate it.
Well, I won't use the metaphor that we talked about earlier about what happened in the rugby this year.
Thanks.
Because I think Wales is going to win the FinTech battle if we use that as the model of success.
We'll take on the challenge. I'm putting Sier against you. Jane, thank you very much for standing in. Looking at your background and many years in Cisco on the education side, but obviously Cisco laid the rails for the internet, for Web 1.0. Do you think Scotland can really play a role in the rails for the FinTech ecosystem for the fourth industrial revolution?
I'm sorry, we could have gone to Wales, but the weather is so bad up there, and that's why we didn't
Compared
go.
to Scotland?
It rains all the time.
Okay.
Yes, there's several reasons why we particularly wanted to go to Scotland, because as you mentioned earlier, there is life outside London, and for small companies, it's very expensive to be here. But we found that in Scotland, people were very into collaboration, which for a small company is really important, but also about transparency and also about scalability. Again, these 3 things are really important for small organisations. And we've been accepted with open arms, with lots of help and guidance. And one of the things that we do as a company is give others help and guidance. So we do a lot of work with educational institutions, getting them to teach the right things, because it's the next generation of people going into work. Are they ready for work? Have they got the right skills? Universities are very receptive with us working with them. But we also have put together, a phone app where global organisations can get their staff to put their mentoring hours on that volunteering app. So we're dipping into corporations to go into universities to mentor young people and older people, because remember, people get made redundant. And of course, there's older people out there, like myself, that, have skills that we can pass on. So, yes.
Brilliant.
It's been brilliant.
Thank you. And Chris, I'm going to come back to you. When we look at an industrial strategy, and let's put the B word to one side for a second, the UK does have to find its role in the fourth industrial revolution. David talked about our rule of law and some of the advantages we have. Is your view, you run companies, you're an academic, you've championed the Northern Powerhouse, do you think we should be looking at a kind of trivial pursuit counter where there are specialism areas? Is it as simple as that?
I kind of started from that perspective when I first started looking around the UK. I think we have a question that we haven't quite answered yet is, what's the point? We've all touched on a little bit of what's going on in the region, but there is a kind of a what the point thing. And I felt that when I first started looking at this, I noticed that there, as you mentioned, were specialisms. Yeah. So I think London is probably the biggest generalist, but if you're an insurance company in London looking to find out about catastrophe risk, you don't look in London, you go to Exeter. Yeah. The Home Office, the Met Office supercomputer is in Exeter. You find your academic research, you find your modelling in Exeter. There's a high-performance computing centre, I think, in Swansea. Is that correct? There's another one in Edinburgh. So there are these pockets of capability around the UK. You can start to focus in on the specialisms. One of the things that we've suffered from very much in the north of England, I'm not from the north of England, I'm from London, I live in London now, but I self-selected at the point when the envoys started to diversify. Originally there was just me as a regional envoy, and then we realized there was big capacity there and we had to sort of pick places to concentrate on. I focused on the north because I could see huge capacity. And to wit, Leeds has 30 banks and building societies headquartered in it. Newcastle has not only Virgin Money headquartered there, it is also the centre for NAREC, which is the National Renewable Energy Centre. So anybody looking at sustainability as an agenda is going to go to Newcastle. The test bed for wind farms is in Newcastle. The test bed for wave and tidal farms is actually in Orkney. So all around the UK, you have these pockets of expertise. And I don't think we should try and replicate those areas of expertise. The Centre for CSIT, which is the UK's, or what it would claim to be, one of, but actually is, the centrally funded Centre for Cybersecurity, is based in Belfast. So wherever you look, there are these pockets of expertise. And if you're a company that's looking to find these things, to start looking in London would be a big mistake. I'll just say one more thing, because I recognise that I'm kind of taking over the microphone here. But the important thing to realise is if you're a company coming into the UK, and we want to encourage you with investment, it's not just about outward trade. We're not just exporting things out to the rest of the world. We're importing things because people in this country have a need. We are a huge domestic market. The asset management industry in the UK is the same size as the entirety of the rest of Europe. Crowdfunding is larger than the entirety of the rest of Europe. It's a huge domestic marketplace. People want to come here, want to keep them coming here. But why would they not? Why would they, go to Newcastle? Why would they go to Leeds? Why would they go to Bristol? And the answer is because they find companies to work with. So the first mission that we ran from inward investment from Scandinavia and the Baltics about a year ago, the premise was very simple. Don't go and talk to Barclays, don't go and talk to HSBC, because you as a startup, they have seen you 20 times in the past 6 months. But I guarantee you the Skipton Building Society hasn't. And what's more, if I make that introduction to you, to the CTO of Skipton Building Society, you will have a direct point of contact with the CTO who has procurement capability, and you're not going to go through 20 layers of intermediation. So if you're looking to bring your company here, don't necessarily think of London. Think about outside London, not just because it's cheaper, but because you'll find the capacity you need, be it academic or industry. You can go to Bristol, you can go to Cardiff, you can go to Swansea, you can go to Edinburgh, you can come to the north. It doesn't matter. But ask the question first of yourself, what is there outside London that I can use as the hook to get me into that domestic market?
That's a great point. And I think we have a responsibility, all of us, to map that out and to find a way digitally, physically, to show all of these different hubs of expertise. I mean, I think, we ought to look at history whilst, as Warren Buffett said, if past history was all there was to success, librarians would all be billionaires. But I think you do need to look back and see the ATM networks, the central clearing houses, were formed because building societies got together and said, we can't compete with the big banks. They're putting ATMs on every single street corner, so let's share some infrastructure, which began the journey to Vocalink. So I completely agree with Chris. It's not just about winning that one big bank. David, if I can, just very quickly.
Vocalink is based in Harrogate.
Correct.
So, north of England.
So, it's another northern... no. So, David, I'm just going to come on to you. We can't forever avoid the B word, and as a proud Irishman, we of course know the best hedge for Brexit has to be Dublin. But in terms of this kind of regional capability, do you agree with what Chris is saying? Can we do more to promote this fact that we have got these areas of expertise across the UK?
Yeah, I think it's the basic kernel of how you build success for a post-Brexit world. If you champion all of the capabilities in all of the geographies with all of the differentiated competitive advantages, then you have a hope of presenting something in its totality that is powerful. And the reason you have to do that is it's all very well, there's a good environment and a capable environment for people to come in and do things, but it's about the money at the end of the day, and they need capital to grow. And right now, the US disposition, or some of them would say, is, well, yeah, whatever. I can go plenty of other places and do far better because I can access all of Europe in one go, or I can go elsewhere. So your risk here, I think the UK is very well positioned. It needs to be better aggregated and better marketed. As a post-Brexit environment, it needs to be able to speak to the force of all of these capabilities that were just described to maintain an inflow of the levels of capital that we would like to see. And if you can do the leveraging of all of the capabilities across all of the jurisdictions of the UK and the sectors, and add to that a powerful story about the scalability, which was the point also mentioned earlier. We haven't really done that well enough. There's been a lot of talk of FinTech startup, but there's not very many scale-ups. So you're going to need the capital if you want to get to scale-up. So I think that the starting point is take every single advantage we have, aggregate it, and powerfully present it, and then really just focus on the fact that it's not about the fintechs and just it's about the capital that fintechs need, and make sure you maintain both of those things in how you present the UK post-Brexit.
And David, just sticking with that point for a second, it's a fantastic point. You know, as we go around the world, we form these fintech bridges. I've just been involved in raising a private equity fund for the first time. And it's fascinating talking to the LP community around the world, the sovereign wealth funds, people that are traditional big-scale investors. And when you talk to them about fintech, and it's really encouraging, they say, we're looking for people that understand the industry. It's not a mature enough industry yet to say, I've got a $12 billion fund and I'm going to allocate X to it. So it's what we call empathetic capital. And if you go to Silicon Valley, everyone knows you can raise your first million, your first 10 million. Their whole model is, I'll back 10 and maybe 2 will make it, but one of them's going to be a moonshot. I think what the UK has to do is find this empathetic capital, has to find money that understands the journey of a fintech and the KPIs. It
does, and I think it has had some good success, but it's been waning in the world of uncertainty. It doesn't mean it's negative, it just means it's a period of uncertainty. But, you know, I've lived in the US and Asia and Africa and Eastern Europe and all of these places and seen that capital firsthand, and there's a big percentage of it that is on a trust basis. You know, I think these people are capable.
Correct.
It assumes an environment behind it that's productive for these people to operate in, which is my earlier point, which I think we have. But there's an awful lot of risk capital that will be deployed for people in a way of, let's just see, because they don't need return on every single investment. They're going to place a series of investments with the hope that one becomes a unicorn or two becomes a unicorn, etc. But right now what you have is a lack of knowledge of the true capability and the true diversity of the UK, and a lack of coherence around the story of the UK, because without that, Brexit is doing damage. So we just need to get our collective, which we're doing, get our collective minds together and make sure that because a lot of my investors in Australia, they speak very highly of the bridge, and they're going to replicate kind of capability on their side, because it was a regulatory bridge to nowhere in its gestation. That's the first time regulators ever got ahead of the curve. But it is a bridge.
Quite right.
And if you have on both sides of that the right mindset and the right understanding, to your point of empathy, around the benefits on both sides in terms of customers and or origination, I think there's a fantastic opportunity to position the UK. And we've got a bunch of bridges. They just all need to be a little bit repainted and repositioned. But at the end of the day, I think that will give us an international dimension which is really gritty, because you cross that bridge into the heart of $1 trillion of capital sitting in Australia looking for some place to go. And you have a great story to tell when you can tell the whole story of the UK.
And if we, at a national level, attract those aqueducts of capital, Richard, make the case, why should people invest in Wales?
Well, I was listening intently to all of that debate and thinking about our particular position, and Chris, you're absolutely right. People come for more than cost. And one of the things that's sort of always at the front when you talk about fintech is culture and lifestyle. That's one very good reason why people don't necessarily want to set up a business in London, where everyone's got to travel an hour plus on the tube, and we have that in spades in Wales. Listening to that conversation, I think also, though, on the issue of capital, patient capital is a key point in this. Some of the sort of funding models in the funds don't align well to the types of long-term models, particularly in Wealthify, where we're doing investing. The path to profit is very long, because you've got to acquire a lot of people over a very long time, and they've got to grow with you before you're ever going to get to profitability. So patient capital is needed. But I do believe that water flows naturally to the lowest point. And in the modern world, with communication, the internet, crowdfunding. Actually, you can find the capital almost wherever you are. There are some bits that we have to do in FinTech Wales and other regions we have to do to probably smooth the path to enable the businesses that need the funding to get to it easily. So bringing people down to hear what companies are doing and taking companies elsewhere to do it, and hubs online and things like that to signpost who's there and what they're looking for. But I believe that actually in the modern world of communication, the internet offers that removes those barriers.
Yeah.
And actually, there is a good reason why, for example, Monzo started in London but chose Cardiff to open its next operating centre for 350 people. And whilst that might initially seem like a bad thing, or it's just a customer service centre, the pioneers went to America. They didn't initially think they were going to do much more than occupy. But of course, once you're there and you've got the office there, and when you need a marketing function that you can't run in London, or a software development function, you realise that Wales has got 4 incredible universities turning out 100,000 software graduates. Actually, you start to build from there. So we have to kind of use the regions in that way, I think.
Okay, and Jane, we're out of time, but let's just finish very quickly with you. How do people find, because we've talked about these envoys and their businesses, how do we find out about your company? What's the website, and how do we
it's Women's Coin Foundation website, and if anybody wants any information, please get in contact.
Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic champions for the fintech industry in the UK. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Well done, guys. Very good.